Putin treats his people like cattle to be herded into war as the Russian economy collapses. One expert's prediction: the Russian people's life expectancy and economic potential will continue to collapse as a result of the decisions made by the current regime. John Bryson, a professor at Birmingham University, told Express.co.uk that Russian President Vladimir Putin has let down his countrymen by mismanaging the wealth that has poured into the country from abroad. Wars cost money that could have been used to improve things like healthcare and civilian industries. Subsequent Western sanctions and a drop in foreign investment led to economic collapse. If you look at Russia's economy, it's really quite interesting. As soon as Putin annexed Crimea, Russia's economy began to collapse, said the chair in Enterprise and Economic Geography at Birmingham Business School to Express.co.uk. According to the World Bank, Russia went from being a middle-income country to a high-income country, and then back to being a middle-income country in 2014. With all the sanctions and wasted investments that Putin has made in this war, the life chances and economic potential of the average Russian have collapsed since 2014. The expert pointed out that in February 2014, Russian troops invaded eastern Ukraine and annexed Crimea. As a response, the European Union, EU, the United States, US, and Canada imposed 3 distinct types of sanctions, including a ban on the export of certain high-tech oil exploration and production equipment to Russia, as well as a ban on the export of certain military and dual-use goods. Oil prices in Russia dropped significantly in the latter part of that year, putting additional strain on the country's currency in addition to the sanctions already in place. The first quarter of 2015 marked the beginning of a recession for the country, as GDP growth was -2.2% lower than in the first quarter of 2014. Professor Bryson gave a lucid account of why he believes the Russian people were wrong. "I was writing op-eds in February and March last year, in which I was basically talking about the tragedy of the Russian people. Unfortunately for the Russian people, their government does not care about the average citizen. They care only about the powerful people who hold political office. So, the average Russian is just a thing to be herded into a war, and their deaths and destruction don't matter at all, because they can be replaced," as one commentator put it. Professor Bryson is of the opinion that the standard of living in Russia would be higher if resources had been invested in the country and its people rather than in war and the elites. He opined that, if all of that investment had been put into enhancing the life chances of the average Russian could be as prosperous and well-off as the average Singaporean. The Federal Statistics Service reported in February that Russia's economy shrank by 2.1% in 2022, the year Moscow began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The office reported in mid-May that GDP dropped by almost 2% from the first quarter of 2018 to the first quarter of 2023. Data released in April showed oil revenues in March were 43% down year-on-year when compared to figures from 2022, even though Russia has managed to return to pre-conflict levels of crude oil exports, mostly thanks to sales directed at India and China. Official data suggests that Russia is more resilient than expected, but the population still seems to be feeling the effects of the sanctions. Late in the month of May, it was reported that a Russian business group had advocated for a 6-day workweek as a means of mitigating the effects of Western sanctions. The official statistics for retail sales in Moscow show that at the end of last year, they were almost 10% lower in comparable prices than they had been in the same period the year before, suggesting that Russian households are also feeling the squeeze. The Association of European Businesses also reported a 58.8% drop in Russian auto sales in 2022 due to the industry's difficulties sourcing parts and establishing new supply chains in the wake of the sanctions.